Hey everybody, it's Ron over Becoming Enlightened Together. I'm sorry. Sometimes this recording, it takes a few seconds before it actually, starts recording. Other times, instantaneously. So, caught me unawares. But the weekly read that I just finished is very positive for us this week. So thank goodness it's not going to be another repeat of what we've been getting the last couple of weeks. And we're looking at energies that primarily seem to be centered around love. Okay, we see that mentioned no less than 4 times out of the 7, days this week. We see also 3 times, in other words, 3 days. We see reciprocity and balance is exactly what we would hope for in a loving relationship. And it talks about partnerships and sex, again, no less than 3 times. It talks about positive change 3 times. It talks about wisdom, awareness, and intuition 3 times. Other energies that it talks about is growth and birth, and that could be the birth of an idea or the birth of a child, and if so, congratulations. It talks about justice and victory, success, courage. It talks about fertility. Okay, and again, fertility doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, getting somebody pregnant, so to speak, or becoming pregnant. It's about, maybe the inception of an idea yet again. Okay, so what I'm getting at is very, very positive energy this week. And we only have 1 day in which, we got a hurdle to get over and so on, and that'll be this Friday. Now again, when I say this Friday, it will be in regards to whatever day or week, I should say, that you are viewing this. So the Friday of whatever week that you in turn are actually witnessing this video. And again, this could be this week for most of us, those of you who are watching right now. And of course, you might pick this out in a year from now or 10 years from now. It'll be, in like regard, the Friday of that particular week where you're viewing this. This is a weekly read. Now, what is the overall energy? It's very positive. It's that of GEBO. This is their letter G in the alphabet, the older Futhark. Okay, and what does GEBO mean in the upright? Well, it talks about giving and receiving, gifts, gifting, reciprocity, balance. Talks about sacrifices, talks about fortune. It talks about exchanges in terms of love. So even a divine union. Now, divine union, some people basically, they either do or don't believe, for example, in soulmates, twin flames, and many of the titles you hear so often in today's spiritual communities. Regardless of what title you give it, sometimes, and it's not every person in every lifetime that experiences this, you come across a person where you simply mesh together as though you literally are one soul. You may have problems, disputes, the occasional argument or whatever, but it's not like it would normally be in, other types of relationships where you're not equally yoked. Again, stealing a vernacular from Christianity. I'm just more familiarized with that than I am in all the other religious or philosophical or mythological belief systems, although I'm trying to get up to speed in those two. But it talks about basically personal relationships and all matters regarding exchanges of any type, up and including 2 contracts. So we've been seeing, that particular terminology coming out quite a bit. So somebody out there may be signing a contract very, very soon. And it could be a contract, I don't know, for a record label or a new job or, maybe a new purchase of something that's, well, it's just making you smile because this is all positive here. So that's the overall energy for this week. Now, only on Friday do we actually have a bit of a snafu here, or just a hurdle to get over, I'll just say, because it's, like I said, generally very positive all the way around on every level. And another thing I forgot to mention already is that we have 3 gods, well, 2 gods, 1 goddess that have manifested in this reading. So that's kind of a big deal too. 2 of the gods are in the upright, and 1 is in the negative in this particular case. So that's never very good. But that's our Friday that I was getting, and I'll get there in a minute. Now, in terms of the overall energy for today, even though it's almost over, is that of Isa. Now, Isa is basically a rune that, because I used to teach, mechanical, electrical technologies, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, refrigeration, and things of that nature. And we had to talk about thermodynamics and other types of concepts or whatever, so that they could really understand what's going on there, the exchange and movement of energy and heat and things of that nature. And this rune captures it perfectly in terms of what, cold is. It's just the absence of energy. Okay? I don't want to get into it. I went through a dry run a few minutes ago on this, and like I said, I just started giving a class. And I do that. I'm so sorry, but that's what I've done for the last 15 years. I was a teacher, so. But anyways, ISAW talks about ice. It talks about static and stagnation, energy loss, precisely what cold is. It's not removing or making something cold, okay, like most people believe. It's the actual removal of energy. When you remove the energy from that air sample, so to speak, it becomes cool, or what we would interpret as feeling as being cool, okay? And again, I'm going to abstain because that's how I got started last time. So it talks about separation, talks about energy loss, exactly. And that's what cooling is, and that's what this represents, cooling. It also talks about challenges and frustrations. Talks about possibly some ill feelings, perhaps some psychological blocks to your thinking, or maybe even an activity of some kind. Perhaps having some type of a grievance, or feeling like you are basically just spinning your wheels, kind of a thing. Talks about the want, need, or perhaps the not wanting so much of the privacy. I love the privacy personally. I like sometimes just being alone for long periods of time. That allows me to connect with the higher realms, and allows me to meditate, it allows me to work out and do all the things I enjoy doing, read. But some people, they can't be without being surrounded by people, and that's a whole nother thing. I don't want to get into it, but anyways, it talks about seeking clarity, and basically it's telling us to go inward, okay? And Sundays, especially in the West, are traditionally days where we do reflect, and many people worship, especially those of the Abrahamic faiths are particularly prone to worship on Sundays. Some in the other sects, which are also Christian and so on. And I'll just use that as a blanket term for it. Like the Seventh-day Adventists, they worship on Saturday, not Sunday, and that's fine. That's neither here nor there when I'm talking about here. It just talks about that today is a day to go inward and seek clarity. Okay, long story short, because I'm long-winded sometimes, I guess. So, or at least that's the way I feel about myself. I try to simplify it, but I end up talking for hours. So, forgive me. So here's the first god that shows up today, and this is for Monday. Monday's energy is that of Mighty Tyre. Now, he's one of my favorite gods in the sense that he represents everything that is associated with leadership. And he is not just a leader, but he really leads by example. There are leaders that, basically will take their sword and they will, prod and poke and everything else to get people to move forward and to do what they want them to do. And there's others by their own example. And just the fact that they are just emanating positive energy and command respect and everything else, that's the type of leadership, to shoot for. And that's the type that I've always tried to, apply. It didn't always work, but I went through all the leadership schools in the Marine Corps. All of them. I volunteered for all the schools I could get. And I did quite well in those things. And it helped me to, be in situations that were far above my pay grade for a long period of time. But back to Tyre. Tyre is the great sky god. Okay, he is a warrior that through his sacrifice allowed them to, for example, chain the great beast, the wolf Fenrir, for a very long span of time until he will break his fetters during Ragnarok, which is the end times, where the forces of good meet the forces of evil once again, and destruction of everything basically takes place, as we also see reflected in many other belief systems. Hinduism in particular keeps coming to my mind as I'm saying this, and of course all the Abrahamic faiths. So with that being said, he is the one that lost his arm in the process. He willingly surrendered it, in the process of, securing this great beast that will, in the end, actually end up killing Odin himself. Okay, and his son Thor is also going to perish in this great battle. In fact, a lot of the gods are going to perish in this battle. So there'll be some new gods, basically, that will be crowned at that point. But they know what's at stake, and still, in typical Viking, fashion, they stand up and they kick ass. They do. But that doesn't mean it's going to be an easy fight, and it doesn't mean that there's not going to be a great deal of, sacrifice given. And that's basically what this rune is all about. It's about being a warrior, being courageous, sacrificing, basically justice and honor, leadership, authority. It talks about rationality, analysis. It talks about knowing one's strengths. These are all leadership traits and attributes, characteristics, It talks about self-sacrifice, yet again, victory, and success in any competition, including legal matters. So we again see possibility of a courtroom type of scenario. And it's saying that it is going to be a very positive outcome for the collective. All right. Now, for Tuesday's energy, we have Mighty Urus. Now, Urus is basically representative of the great auroch, or the ox, that was hunted into extinction approximately 500 plus years ago in Europe. It was a mighty, mighty beast, a powerful one that they looked on with awe and respect. So the auroch represents those types of attributes. It talks about strength and health and vitality. It talks about energy and speed, untamed potential. Talks about courage again, tenacity, possible. Talks about wisdom, understanding. Talks about positive change. Talks about the forming of oneself, based upon your own will. Talks about masculine potential here, and sexual arousal. So there's a lot about, hanky-panky for this week. So if you've been hoping and expecting and so on, or maybe you're just feeling a little bit closer to your loved one, your spouse this week, it looks like it's going to be very, very successful for both of you. Now, this doesn't just reflect the man's want or needs. This is also reflective of the female's needs being met and so on as well. That's what this is talking about. So, all right, now Wednesday we have another one of the yin and yang runes. It's Nalthus. Now, Nalthus is kind of the way that it was etched on this particular black stone is a little bit weird. It looks almost like GEBO, but it's supposed to be a cross with a canted, horizontal beam. Okay, and that talks about needs, talks about necessities, uh, possible distress, delays and confusion and conflict. But it also reflects, like I always said, being that these are kind of, and this is why I call them the yin and yang runes, because then it talks also about and reflects the opposite of that, where the resistance from those things leads to strength. Again, like a wound, it heals and becomes scar-like tissue around it, so it's much more difficult to harm that specific area again. So it also reflects self-reliance, innovation, conflict resolution. It talks about endurance, and we saw that with the previous rune with Urus. It talks about survival. It talks about determination, change, patience, recognizing one's own fate, and facing your fears. So being very courageous, brave, and standing your ground for whatever that looks like for you individually out there. What I forgot to say is there are elements in this energy that are not just necessarily reflective of the collective in general. There are, of course, several of the karmics in our individual lives, and again, that whole scenario will differ from each individual out there as well. It could be karmic or karmics, and it could be family member of some kind. It could be a wife, a spouse. It could be a child. It could be a worker, a co-worker, I should say, or just a friend. It could be any of those types of things, and because of, I don't know, it could be any number of reasons why they have been planning, plotting, and scheming against you all of this time, and you may not even be aware of it, or had been made aware of it. Hopefully by now you've got some idea who these people are, okay, because some of the things that they have been doing, that we've been reading about, are pretty heinous. Now, a lot of the energy they've been trying to send your way has not been having the effect that they had hoped for. In fact, a lot of the energy, because you are highly protected, is going right back to them. And hopefully that means you're exercising, the spiritual practices of cleansing, perhaps sending or at least transmuting the energy that is coming your way, or things that, you become quickly, I guess you could say, the awareness that something is amiss, that you're feeling things or thinking things that aren't ordinarily your thoughts or feelings, and you recognize this could be coming from somewhere else. Okay, now I know that people can use things like that as a way of excusing themselves from their own responsibility and things like that, but that's not what I'm talking about. Yeah, we all have that dark side, all of us, and it's ridiculous to deny it, But what I'm talking about are things that you ordinarily would not think or feel, or maybe just a state of angst and just worry and so on, and you'll transmute that energy. You'll turn that. You'll say, wait a minute, I honor that, I respect that, I noticed that, and now I'm going to change that energy into something positive. Whether it's going out there, especially if it's something that's fiery, like a lot of angst and anger and other things, you can turn that into probably one of the better workouts you'll ever have, or whatever the case may be. Or you can create a piece of music and what have you. You can transmute these things in a multitude of ways. So this is what alchemy really is, by the way. Although there is some truth, of course, and many have purported to be able to change base metals into something precious like gold, you know. So there is some truth to that, perhaps, but that's not ordinarily what it means. We can transmute almost anything, okay, including our emotions, because it's energy. In fact, everything is energy. Everything. All right, so now this, although it's a yin and yang, it has good and bad qualities. All right, now Thursday's energy is that of another goddess, and it is that of Berkana, and it too, of course, is in the upright, and this represents the goddess Birchta. Now, Birchta is just one of many names, just like most of these the gods and goddesses, depending on what time frame and which culture, you know, they will differ in terms of their actual given name, but the characteristics will remain basically the same. So she is referred to as the Great Mother, like kind of like Mother, you know, Earth or whatever the case may be, or Mother Nature, you know, looking after the flora, the fauna, the animals that inhabit the world, as well as, you know, the young and especially females and so on. Not to say that she overlooks the masculine, it's not like that, but, you know, the more vulnerable, the more incapable of really looking after themselves in terms of, you know, the predatory species that are out there. All right, so it refers to things such as purity. That's what the birch tree represented to them, purity. And it can be used in certain types of, you know, tinctures and things like that for healing and all of that kind of stuff. It also refers to birth and fertility, growth, in terms of mental, physical, and spiritual aspects. So it also refers to regeneration and renewal, liberation from something perhaps. Talks about new beginnings, a new enterprise or venture being entered into, a love affair, and again, arousal of desire. So, and this is non-sexual, or I should say, non-sex. No, how would I say that? It's not referencing masculine or feminine, just a general overall energy. So, hopefully you're both feeling it. I mean, what good is it? Well, I guess some people would say, I don't care. As long as I'm getting mine, I don't care. But, you know, I don't think that kind of relationship's meant to last, okay? So, just saying. Some people, that's the way they like it. They just want to get theirs and move on. And that's not what this represents, and that's not the collective. So, if that's your lifestyle, then you're not the collective, probably, or at least not yet. Okay, just keep working on your issues, your addictions, and you'll, you know, get to a point where you can really, well, enjoy those types of things with no guilt and with no karma attached to it. Okay. All right. Now, Birchta is also referred to as the Great Mother. So it's that kind of a feel to it in a sense. So it also talks about, well, it's a very, very positive energy, and that's exactly what we need, because the next day, going into or out of Thursday into Friday, we end up hitting into another god, and this is the twin brother of goddess Freya. This is her brother Freyr's rune. This is Ingwas. Now, Ingwas can often be just displayed as the diamond that you see in the middle, or as you see there, something like an hourglass. Well, it's not really an hourglass. I don't know. Call it what you will. But anyways, it's in the reverse. Now, Freyr, God Freyr, is the great earth god. Okay, but in reverse, it talks about energy such as impatience, feeling scattered, maybe somebody who's self-absorbed, somebody who wants to move but hasn't changed yet. So movement without change, a disassociation with nature or the environment. Again, stagnation, That's something that we saw a lot the last couple of weeks. Somebody who's feeling bottled up, perhaps. We've all felt that at times. So, like I said, this isn't necessarily as bad as this could be. If it was also encompassed many of the other days following with the equally negative or low vibrational energy. But this talks about seduction. So somebody who's possibly seductive, or somebody's coming in to try to seduce them. It talks about trying to fool someone into thinking that some transition or what have you has been complete, rather than it being only a stage. They still have work to do. And also meaningless motion, doing things that have no consequence, really, at least in terms of making some type of forward movement or momentum. So that's on Friday. Okay, so use caution, be prepared. And Saturday, what we see is Degas. The Degas is in the upright as well. Okay, so what Degas talks about, again, is day or dawn. Talks about clarity, light. Talks about breakthroughs and growth. Talks about ambition, being connected in the cosmic consciousness, which, everybody in the collective, I would assume, is, maybe in different ways, but they do have some type of connection, rather with, the gods that they serve, or God that they serve, their ancestors, with their higher self, all those types of things. Okay, so it talks about awareness, intuition, clarity. It talks about a time to embark on, again, on an enterprise. We saw that twice this week, and making changes to one's reality out of sheer will. That's where I'm at. It talks about hope, happiness, and it talks about transformations. It talks about certainty and security. Again, growth. It talks about release and balance. And it's also the place where opposites meet, which is what Degas is. I mean, if you look at the point, it's like two triangles turn on their side and they come together in the middle, so to speak. Now that's the one that looks more like an hourglass. But that's Degas. Very, very positive. So as you can see there, this whole week is going to be very, very good for everybody out there in terms of, well, I shouldn't say things like that because that can get me in trouble. When I say that it's going to be good, what I'm seriously trying my best not to say is that the energy that is available to all of us, as far as those particular days are concerned, are very positive. But the only hurdle that we can see here currently being Friday. Okay, and even that energy is more of a warning to us of what could be coming our way, or even, like I said, those who are or would have been labeled as karmic up to now. Thing I need to say is that the karmics have been getting their asses kicked, some of them anyways. Others, they just simply refuse to learn their lessons. And as we've seen over the last couple of weeks, again, specifically, some of them may not even make it. Some of them may actually end up losing their lives. Now, just because somebody passes away in your life, that doesn't mean that they were the karmic. You should have, at least by now, some understanding or idea, at least, in your intuition, your gut, who they're referring to in terms of karmic, or it could be plural as well. Okay. And again, some of these people have actually, I don't want to use the word submitted, because that could actually, spur a desire, because they haven't yet healed. Their pride, their ego would kick up, and instead of realizing that this was meant for good, not evil, they may actually revert back, saying, you know what, you, kind of a thing. And So I don't want it to go off like that. I'm just saying that those who have been getting their asses kicked, there's some examples. It seems that some of them anyways, have reconsidered their actions and are already starting to take moves in the other direction. And even though they're not at the same level as the collective in terms of the work that they've done and succeeded at and everything else, they are making moves in that direction. So it's not too late. I mean, if you still have breath in your lungs, then you can make these changes. That doesn't mean that, just because you said sorry, that you're not going to, if you will, still be punished or suffer from the consequences of your earlier actions. It's not the way it works, but you can lessen its effects. You can use it as the lesson that it is and learn from that lesson as fast as you can and make sure that you are absorbing it. You're in the moment so that you can get the most out of that lesson, because until you learn it, you're not going to be given the relief that you're looking for. Okay? At least that's the way that I have observed it thus far and experienced it in my own life. So that's our reading collective, and I'm happy to finally be able to give you something positive. I felt pretty good about it today, and I was really hoping that it would be less, low vibrational or less focused just on what's going on with the karmics, and more about what's going on with the collective, or even those brothers and sisters of ours who have decided to get on board and see the senselessness, of their envy, ego, pride, and all those things, which just keep them from really experiencing what life can be like. Okay. Yes, they had their fun, and now they're paying the price. Some are losing their health. Some have lost all of their possessions or are in the process thereof. Some have lost their jobs. Some have lost ones that are close to them. And again, I don't want this for anybody out there, even my enemies and everything else. I prefer that they would learn their lessons and, before these kinds of things happen. But some of them just have not wanted to relent in any way, shape, or form. And that's not a good trait when it's meant for the right reasons. And maybe I'm choosing my words wrong, but you know what I'm saying, I hope. And as a result of their stubbornness and pride and ego, they are going to be forced into submission, even to the point of, like I said, surrendering their own life and existence, or possibly their health. So, and I don't want that for you, and I hope you don't want that for yourself. But if that's the kind of energy you've been putting it out there to people in the collective, those are the things that are coming back your way. And if you haven't already experienced them, I assure you, it's simply a matter of time. And it looks like time is really speeding up in terms of ending this cycle. So, and again, that's going to be different for each and every one of you out there. Some of you already stepped over the finish line. Others, you are just starting, the journey. So again, it's like everything else I say, the time is relative. It is not linear like we've all been led to believe. And we can understand that. And I have a hard time trying to explain it because it's a complex, issue. But, the difference, for example, of our ability to perceive things is like when we here on this material plane, we look at things, at least from a perspective of time. We look at it like we would observe a parade going by. We're on the street level with them, so all we see is, as they progress past us. I can't see the beginning of the parade or the end of the parade, but if I was to be in a helicopter above that parade, I could literally see the beginning and the end and everything in between simultaneously. So, that's what time, is. It's like a hologram. Now, in a hologram, every small part has the whole within it. So if you were to break down it from a molecular standpoint, that molecule individually would be identical to the whole, as above, so below. Okay, that's what this is talking about in a sense. There are multiple dimensions happening simultaneously. And depending on where your frequency and energy is right now, and hopefully you're maintaining it, at least for the most part. We all have good, bad days. But as you keep that energy, risen high and stuff like that, you'll get past these types of hurdles much, much quicker. Okay? And this is why I am trying desperately to explain this issue to you, because if you are one of these karmics and you're cross-watching right now, I welcome you, of course. You're my brother and sister too. You're just a little bit younger in the journey, and it may take you another try or two to catch on to all of this and to be serious about it, okay? But regardless, I wish you all the absolute best, and hopefully this has been something of a help to somebody out there. If you're watching this, then there's something in it for you. So with that being said, I wish you all the very, very best. Of course, stay victorious out there, and we will all meet someday to do battle against these monsters, these beasts, and the evil in general, alongside the great gods and goddesses, regardless of what your belief systems are. We see the same, more or less, thing being represented in different ways. But we will be victorious, and I'll meet you all in Valhalla someday. Take care. God bless.